So I'm recording. I usually like to start off with heavy breathing.
Yeah.
It
Just,
really
and then
brings them in.
then some chips, just a couple crunches.
Heavy breathing, sounds of people eating.
Yeah.
You know,
And,
that's
and
the secret sauce. That is the good stuff.
sprinkle a little flatulence.
This may derail really quickly.
Yeah, it may.
Okay. By the way, do you like my these aren't real glasses, they're my blue light glasses.
Oh yeah.
But
Deanna has
like glasses. Like
you look good. You look good. Deanna's got a pair of those. So
oh, wait, they don't do anything. Okay. So tell me how you got started with State Line Distillery. Maybe before we do that, I should pump up State Line Distillery.
Sure.
Because you know this, and many of probably people on my network might know this, but anyone who I introduce State Line to and they sip on the nectar, it's like life-changing. One time where at my birthday party, 40th birthday party a couple of years ago, we had a bartender and a group of my friends who don't know you tasted the spirits, because you brought the spirits, and they're like, what is this tonic water? And they went to the bartender. He's like, he just held up something he probably got at SA or something.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh my gosh, it's the gin. And from then on, they've been unbelievably obsessed with State Line.
Well, that's
and
fantastic.
And your gosh, what is it? Your rum.
Yeah, the rum.
That is
that
like
was
buttery goodness.
That was a fun project. I mean, totally outside of kind of the wheelhouse when we started, but we just did a deep dive on kind of traditional Jamaican rum dunder pits, which is essentially
Thunder pits.
Dunder with a D.
Okay.
So
pits.
if you pits. So the way rum is traditionally made is to kind of dig these pits in Jamaica, to dig these pits where they have kind of natural fermentation process happening, and it's some really there's a product in there called butyric acid, which is the smell and taste of vomit.
Oh.
But when it actually esterifies into isobutyric acid, it's banana. So it's like a really crucial part of rum. And so we got really interested in like, could we create a dunder pit on our own, kind of in our own place? So we did, and I'm not sure of anybody else doing it necessarily. And maybe
it's
there is.
Delicious.
Thank you.
I mean, I told you the story when Jess tasted it for the first time. She tastes a little sip and goes, taste it again. Oh. And oh my gosh. And then I tasted it, and that bottle was probably gone within a day.
Yeah, we're just going to put that experience on our bottle and website.
Yeah. So. Okay, enough of that. So I remember we met in college. So for folks who don't know, State Line Distillery is based in Madison. You're the founder and operator. You're from the Twin Cities, grew up in Golden Valley area.
I did.
We met at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And even then, I remember you talking about kind of a dream of owning something similar to this. I know it has gone through a number of iterations. So how did this all start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really did go through several iterations. I mean, my background is biology, and I've always been interested in making things, especially when it comes to alcohol. I mean, my grandpa introduced me to home brewing, when I was around 21, we'll say, and kind of got me going down the rabbit hole. And this idea of fermentation sciences really piqued my interest. So, I mean, but that was back in 98 or so, and 99. And I didn't really ever think of this as a career necessarily at that time. It was just, I knew I wanted to be involved in this in some way. but maybe even just as a hobby, or eventually owning my own Irish pub. There was like kind of
Mhm.
this, all these conversations happening in my mind, about how I wanted to pursue this. And in the meantime, I went through, got my degree in biology, and started working at the University of Minnesota, like as an undergrad, or a post grad student, and really found that I liked working with students in a lab setting. And so then my kind of my career path, as many are, was really winding. So I ended up kind of applying for and getting into a program in higher education, and got a degree in educational policy and administration. That's what actually led me to Madison. So I started working for Edgewood College, and was enjoying that work very much. But on the weekend, found myself volunteering at Lake Louis Brewing and shoveling grain, and just kind of keeping one toe in that world. And 4 years into my career at Edgewood College, I came across a program that was a master's in science in brewing and distilling in Scotland. And it honestly was, I still can remember it, like sitting back from my computer, and like the amount of excitement in my body was just, it was some more palpable than I think anything I had felt in terms of like a career. And I sat there, and I ended up calling my parents, and I said, I think I'm going to quit my job and move to Scotland and do this. And there was a long silence. And
All right.
oh, and to my parents' credit, like they were like, this is, you got one shot at this thing called life. If this is your dream, go for it. So yeah, I quit my job, applied to the program and got in, and then quit my job. Quit my job, and
Very
yeah,
nice.
yeah. And so I got got into that program, and I moved over there. And honestly, I went over there because all my experience had been in beer. I really thought I was going to open a brewery. But when you live in Scotland and are kind of surrounded by the art of distillation, it just, there's another layer of romanticism and expressive quality that comes with distillation, and I just fell in love with it. And so it was there where I kind of shifted my focus and said, this is something I want to do.
So
Um,
how did you, because so often people have these dreams, but they never become reality.
yeah,
So, because your career path in as an activities director, you were moving up.
yeah,
That career was progressing. So you could
was,
easily, I mean, I could see you right now if you stayed on that path, being a head of activities at University of Wisconsin. I mean, uh, so my point is, it
yeah,
was comfortable. There's so many people who are enjoy what they're doing right now, but it's comfortable for them,
yeah,
and they don't get past the dream threshold. So
right.
what was it that got you past that into action?
Yeah, I mean, I think, boy, that's a great question. For me, it was really taking time to allow myself to think about what I was truly passionate about and what I wanted to do. And while I love higher education, I still have a really, hold it in high esteem, and I love everything that I learned from being in that profession. The idea of me being able to create something from scratch with my hands, and move through the process, that when you start a day and you finish a day, you have something tangible to share with people. To me, it was such an exciting idea. And so at first it was just kind of in my head. And honestly, the hardest part, or when I felt the most vulnerable, is when I finally just said it out loud. And I started telling my friends and family that I'm going to start a distillery.
Mhm.
And once I said it out loud and put it into the world, um, it became a reality to me. And in some ways, I decided I wasn't gonna, go back on my word in terms of what I said everyone else, and I wanted to see this thing through.
So, okay, now you say it out loud. What, because for folks, the reason why I wanted to really talk about this, because I think there are a number of people out there right now who want to start their own business or were forced into starting their own business because they can't find work, or maybe they're laid off and this dream has always been out there, but now they're forced to really reckon with it. So now you've said it out loud, and I think hearing your path is good for people. What next? I mean, then, because you didn't major in business, you didn't do any of that. So how do you tackle all that?
That is where the real work began. So yeah, I started to, at first I started on my own, just kind of researching how to write a business plan, and talking to people that had written a business plan before. And that was helpful, but it wasn't kind of moving me to the end goal that I wanted. I needed help. So I actually applied to the Small Business Development Center at the University of Wisconsin, which is it's a taxpayer funded program, so free, to get help. And they, I had submitted what I had of a business plan, and they took me on as a client and under their wing. And that's really when things started to accelerate. So I spent a year and a half research and writing my business plan, talking to everybody I could about how to run a business like this. Because when I came back from Scotland, I was working at a distillery, and had a mentor there, but he hadn't opened a distillery at that point. So it was really just kind of talking about production side of things. So the business side of how to do that, how to write, a profit and loss spreadsheet that makes sense in terms of what you anticipate your costs to be versus what they actually are. That was all brand new to me. So I just dug into it. And so it was about reading books. It's about finding people that know a heck of a lot more about that than me, and then trying to soak up everything I possibly could.
If you were doing this now, married with a child, would that have changed anything about still doing this? Because I know there's probably some people out there who think, I've got other obligations right now. How do I follow my dream when I need a paycheck?
Well, I think you got to mitigate risk, or how comfortable are you with risk? I feel extremely fortunate to have a partner who pushed me along and said, this is what you want to do. I mean, my daughter, Chloe, she was 6 months old when we broke ground on this. Now, that was a lot. If you back out from there and say, you're going to have a 6-month-old and you're going to try to build a distillery at the same time, that was a lot. And so there is a point where when you decide that the risk is something that you can take on, and to be totally clear, like the amount of money it took to start a distillery, my wife and I were signing on the dotted line to say our house is on the line, everything's here. I mean, even though the company is an LLC, there is a point where the bank makes you guarantee everything behind that. And so we had a lot of discussions about, worst case scenario, we lose our house. Are we okay with that? We lose all of our savings and we have to start over and move into an apartment. And at the end of the day, we decided, yeah, we're okay with that. Now, thankfully, thus far, we haven't had to face that reality. But I do think someone who gets into their own business and it's a high capital investment kind of a business, you have to be realistic about the level of risk you're going into, and making sure you're willing to do that.
We'll talk about resilience too, because clearly you're still growing your business and doing it through a pandemic. I mean, I remember you telling me, like, I prepared for a lot of outcomes.
Yeah.
A global pandemic was not one of them.
No, no. I mean, when you focus a huge amount of your business on on-premise growth, and then all the restaurants in the entire state get shut down, that's a bit of a 1-2 on you.
So we'll talk about that because I think there's a lot of resiliency in anything that is helpful. But
Yeah,
if you had to, so with the premise of knowing there's still things you're going to be learning and growing, but if you had to tell yourself when you started this from your vantage point now, what are some things that you would have told younger John about this process that might be helpful for people who are just starting that process?
yeah. I think breaking down what you think you need in terms of capital, and then doubling it. You hear that all the time, and I thought I had done that, but there's still there's still more that I wish I would have had to start, which would have made the earlier years easier on us. I mean, we made it. We were scrapping and we were pulling ourselves up. But capital, capital, capital. I mean, cash is king, and if you run out of it, you're in trouble. So that's one thing I would say is that in a business where you're going to be manufacturing or doing anything like that, you need to have the cash flow to manage that. And it's always easier to ask for it up front than it is to go back to a bank and knock on their door and say,
Yeah.
I need a little bit more. So that's a practical, just purely financial aspect. I think the other thing I would have focused on a little differently is probably having more resources allocated in time, people and time towards outreach, to actually physically be out there hand selling our product. I think our story is strong, our brand is strong, our branding is strong, and our community ties are strong. But this is a really competitive market. And so to really think about that aspect as an absolute crucial hire from the get-go probably would have served us well.
So you're talking like communications, marketing, something like that? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking specifically about like a field sales representative
I
out
see.
there hitting the pavement. As every business owner knows, you wear a ton of hats in the beginning, and that was a hat I was wearing, but with a 6-month-old at home, and she was like 9 months old when we opened, I guess, and trying to manage day-to-day business operations and be out doing ride-alongs with the distributor reps, tastings. I think we could have accelerated some of our growth earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What surprised you about all of this?
One of the bigger surprises early on was the amount of collaborative spirit within the industry that kind of existed, which I really didn't know or think that would be the case. But we're all competing with one another, but we all see ourselves in the same group, in terms of craft spirits, for instance, or even craft beer. So, from the time I've started to now, I mean, I'm on the board of Madison Makers, which is a new entity here in Madison that includes breweries and distilleries and wineries and mead makers, to kind of just raise the level of knowledge about us. And so that actually really surprised me in terms of what I thought was going to be kind of a business where people were kind of siloed and people were really interested in working together. On a business side, my own personal business, I think one of the bigger surprises is how many barriers of entry it felt like to get all the paperwork and everything done to be approved as a distillery. It's a really hard thing to break into. And honestly, I've talked, over the years, I've had plenty of conversations with people that are wanting to get into this business and just kind of being a resource for them. And I always hear that too. Like, that's one of the hardest things. And in fact, I haven't seen anybody actually come in from the people I've spoken with.
Because of just regulation of what the product that you're dealing with.
Yeah,
What do you mean
yeah.
by that?
It's a highly regulated industry, alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even more so than beer, in terms of, we're working with high proof spirits that are flammable, and in some cases before it's at bottle proof, an explosive material. So there's just so many layers of complexity there when you start thinking about, all the way down from the city municipality up to the federal government wanting to make sure that every drop of alcohol is accounted for. So it's just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's not intuitive, and so it's hard to manage that. So that was surprising to me. Like no one I ever spoke with mentioned how hard it was to get through all of that.
You mentioned some of the tips. What, just generally, whether they're not necessarily someone who's putting together a distillery, but maybe whatever their entrepreneurial spirit is taking them. What are some things that you think is kind of key for whether it's their personality or just things to check off the box if they're going to make this, if they're going to make it?
They're going to make it. Well, I think you have to have some ability to manage stress in terms of risk. So, you never realize, or I guess for me, I should say, when you have a layer above you in an organizational chart, there's a lot of security in that. And then suddenly one day when you're an entrepreneur, that's gone. The buck stops with you. You're employing people if you've got multiple, employees and things like that. And so every decision you make feels like it carries a lot more weight. And then there's the financial stress that's just tied to opening a business, whether it's new or established. So that's one. You have to be able to live in that and be okay with that. The second thing I think is anybody that's going to survive and thrive as an entrepreneur needs to recognize where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are, and then surround themselves with people that can fill that in and let them do their work. If you're going to have them hired, or if you're running solo, you need to find mentors that you can bounce ideas off that can tell you about your blind spots. Those are huge key things to me. I mean, building my team here at State Line was, and still is, the most important thing I do every day outside make spirits. But you want to have the right people hired in the right position, and then get out of the way and let them do their job. You support them and challenge them and keep the vision of the company going where it needs to, but let the people that you hired for specific tasks do that work. And I think that's a hard thing, because this is my baby. This is my dream. And so you have to have an element of being able to let go of some of that and say, I trust you. You're part of this team to make a decision, and or push back on my decisions and say, John, this isn't right. We should be looking at this, or we should be looking at this, and not have, not bring the ego into that.
How much does resilience play a part in all of this?
Huge amount. Yeah, I think you have to be able to not only be resilient, but be willing to change directions and pivot quickly. I think this mantra should apply to every business. I heard this many years ago at this point. It's, fail quickly and fail cheaply. So you're going to have a lot of things that don't go perfect. When you're running a business, when you're opening a business, there's going to be hiccups along the way, from the moment you sign a contract to building out on a building. There's going to be moments that you didn't foresee. And so being able to take that hit and then say, all right, how are we going to get through this? And just keep on pushing. And so that's, being able to manage that and manage the stress that comes along with that are key.
And I hear in your answer, it's always moving forward.
Yes.
You know, in any action you take, you're always pushing forward, whether it's just one step today in the hopes of maybe 10 steps the following day, but it's always moving forward. Am I
It
hearing that
is.
right?
You are. And I think, one of the biggest challenges of running a business is getting caught up in the weeds. Every single day I've got a million tasks on my plate to take care of. But you have to take the time to step back and take the 10,000-foot view. Like that, even if you're just literally putting it in your calendar, scheduling the time to close down the office door and say, like, I need to spend time thinking about what are our goals for 2021? What are our goals for Q1 through Q4? Where do we want to be in 2 years? Where do I see in 5 years? Because without kind of your direction and mission, you're going to get pulled in a million directions. And if you don't have a guiding North Star, it's easy to get off course, I think.
Speaking of resilience, COVID-19, mother of resilience.
Yeah.
How, I think your story is a lesson, not only just specific to your business, and not just to business in general, but just in life.
Yeah.
How in the heck do you move forward when you're faced with what seems like a brick wall that will not move?
Yeah. Well, I mean, fortunately for us, on page 3 of my business plan, I had a point-by-point breakdown for a pandemic. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, a 9-point plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that's,
I'm just going to open up my
hold on.
file cabinet.
Just pull it out. There it is.
Oh, here it is. Let's read it. Check 1. Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a sudden thing. I don't, I'm not sure we will hopefully never experience anything like this again. I mean, one day we're open and they're talking about kind of adjusting our own internal kind of how we're going to manage being a cocktail lounge, to 3 days later us shutting down. And we're coming on a year now that we've just been closed. So after, I guess I'd say, after the shock of that wore off, it was again getting to work. So I mean, I immediately started kind of looking into every possible avenue for help. So that was the payroll protection plan. That was the EIDL loans that were being handed out by the government, and just kind of getting a lay of the land of, okay, what if we shutter 95% of what we're doing, what do we need to keep the lights on, and then how do we get there? So again, that's that moving forward. So you sit down with the key employees here and say, this is what I'm thinking. I think communication with my employees was crucial at that moment. So at one point, it's dang near daily emails going out to say, here's what I'm hearing, this is what we're doing, I'm letting you all know where we're at and where we're going. And so, that was the starting point, is let's take a step, pause, figure out how much money we need to keep the lights on, talk to my landlord, reach out to every resource possible to say, where's the flexibility points? Where do we have no flexibility? And luckily banks and landlords, everybody was pretty flexible to work with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving ahead, trying to find creative ways to kind of bring in revenue. And so for us, that ended up being partnering with the state to produce hand sanitizer. So totally outside of our lane in anything we had done up to that point. But when the FDA and the World Health Organization put out guidelines to say this is how distilleries can do this, then we knew we had a clear path that we could get this done in a way that was safe and going to help a lot of people. So we partnered with the state of Wisconsin to kind of distribute hand sanitizer for several months throughout the state.
Last couple questions, and this one wasn't on our list, so who knows if you'll, but what,
Flops.
we've been talking a lot about just the ways in which to run a business, but
Yeah,
I would suspect if you're going to survive this, you got to love it.
yeah.
What is it about this that you love?
So much. Every day is a challenge. Every day is something new. I think I'm using all the skill sets that I've brought in from my previous professional journey. So my uh, kind of management skills that I learned in higher education, my
Mhm.
people skills, all those things are crucial to building a team. So I think it's exciting to me to build a culture here, that one that is inclusive and strong in the community, and just has a real that I can see other people having a level of passion for State Line within our own building walls, that is you know matching mine. When I'm getting
Mhm.
texts from employees, my bar manager at 9:30 at night about some interesting vermouth article he's reading on as we're kind of looking into new product development. Like that's amazing to me. Like
Mhm.
that kind of got that kind of sense of buy-in. So that excites me. I think the challenge of just building something that
Mhm.
didn't exist before, uh, is fun. It's stressful. It's hard. But in general, I'm excited to come to work every day. And then I think the last thing is I'm gonna say it's working with working a process. So
Mhm.
I spent much of my professional life um, engaged in intellectual conversation in terms of committees I was on, and in all really meaningful work. Um, but there's something extremely satisfying about starting the day, mashing in grain to start a fermentation, and by the end of the day that fermentation's going, or starting a distillation, and by the end of the day we've got vodka or gin or whiskey,
Hmm.
whiskey to go into the barrel. So I think there's something inherently in humans to want to work with their hands, to want to do something that's process driven. And so for me, I get the best of all worlds. I get to use when I come to work, I get to think really critically about strategy on how to build and grow a business. I get to work on professional development with my staff and how to create a culture that everybody is thriving in and feeling challenged and supported. And I get to see a product that didn't exist now out in the world that people can enjoy. So there's those things that excite me every
Mhm.
single day.
Are there days where it's not fun? And if it's not fun, how do you get through that?
uh, sure. I mean, yeah, it's all cherries and roses. I don't think that's a saying, but
It is now.
yeah, it is
It
now.
is now.
Yeah, of course, there's days that are hard. I would, especially, I think I've been very, very lucky. The people I have working here, we really don't have personnel days where that's a challenge. The people that I work with, but yeah, when you're not selling as much product or there's financial stress like that can creep in on a day and make it really challenging. Thinking about, like, we tried this and it didn't work. Now we're going to try this, and what does this work, or happen. So I think there's days where it's that bringing that in is difficult. And then, you know, there's times when if something goes wrong, a piece of equipment isn't working correctly, or part of the process is taking much longer. At the end of the day, that's usually me that's going to be staying here late and adjusting my schedule, and asking my partner to take on more of parenting roles for
Mhm.
that evening. And so those are, that's not necessarily fun, but it's part of the job. You kind of the the benefit of owning your own business is that you set your own schedule. The challenge of setting your own schedule is that you could always be working every single moment of the day.
Mm-hmm. How do you separate then? How do you uh, when do you get some me time and not feel guilty?
Yeah, I think for the first year and a half, I didn't. I mean, in terms of not feeling guilty, we
Mm-hmm.
definitely took some time after we kind of got established as the business to, take a weekend or something. But it's really hard to fully unplug. I think now here we are coming on 4 years into the business. Um, the level of trust I have with my staff, when we put up, if I'm going to go out of town for a few days or just completely unplug, um, it's maybe me now checking in like, hey, how you guys doing? And they respond, shut down the phone, you're on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, coming back to, you know, hiring the right people and empowering them to do their job so that when you need and want to step away, you can. I also think you just kind of have to create rules for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I very rarely miss dinner with my family and bedtime with Chloe and
Mm-hmm.
because that's important to me. That these are times we can't get back, and if I need to work later in the evening, that so be it. But you just have to set a boundary and kind of draw a line and say, unless it's an absolute emergency, um, this is part of the company culture. And then we built it in, so it's not just me saying
Yeah.
that. I expect everybody to do that. One of the things we say around here all the time is family first. So you take care of yourself, you take care of your family, and everything else just kind of falls into line because we have a group of hard workers here.
Yeah. Last two questions. One question I should have asked in the beginning. Tell me a little bit about State Line Distillery.
Yeah. So State Line, we're a fully grained glass distillery, just located about a mile down from the capital here in Madison. And I think that location, when I chose it, it's really important to me because it allowed us to be easily accessible from bike, from walking, from anybody, so that they could come in and actually see the process. So we pride ourselves on working very closely with local farmers, both for grains and kind of our botanicals. It's to me, having a strong sense of community and pride in what we're doing is so important. I mean, just from even our name, State Line, it's about that celebration of agricultural history within the state of Wisconsin. So there's so many things that we can get from local farmers that help create our product, that it strengthens not only our brand but our entire community. And so that to me is so important. Um, yeah, so we have a wide range of spirits anywhere. We started with vodka and gin, but now, we've got a single malt whiskey that was developed kind of in a recipe that I thought about when I was in Scotland. And then we've got a peated single malt and rye and bourbon, and coffee liqueur and the rum, a light rum that's delicious. So it's just been a joy to kind of bring these spirits to life and then share them with other people. And then we have on site a beautiful cocktail lounge where we create, Mike, our bar manager, creates these amazing drinks, and it's all about an experience. We want to invite people in so that they can see what a distillery looks like, enjoy a cocktail without it feeling pretentious, and then have an excited conversation with a bar staff
Mm-hmm.
or myself if I'm there about how we do things and why is it different.
Yeah, it's I've said this to anybody who will listen. It is truly some of the best, if not the best, spirits I've ever drank. And before I met you and you started this, I was never really a spirits guy. I'd get some when I'd go out, but I never make any of myself.
Yeah.
And then after, tasting your gin for the first time, I think this is even before you even really started. I was like, I could drink this on its own with ice. And now it's so good. And I love just the feel in your place. I mean, it truly is, you're living your brand, and your story is consistent in every interaction, whether it's in the booze or in the people or in the architecture. It all kind of has that same feel. By the way, I should tell people that I probably say this in the intro, but just in case I don't, I mean, John obviously is a dear friend. He's a brother. Um, so I'm a little biased, and I'm a quote unquote investor. It's the smallest you can give. We gave. So I don't want to make it, I say that as more of transparency,
Yeah.
but truly, even if I wasn't any of those things, I'd still think this is so good, because it's fantastic. And I hope it gets closer to the Twin Cities, so I don't always have to drive to Hudson.
Well, and I think that's one thing I actually would love to just touch on in terms of none of what I've been able to accomplish would have been possible without friends and family believing in me and investing in this thing. I mean, the the financial hurdle to starting a distillery is high, and so uh, I often was blown away by the number of people in my close circle who are willing to pony up and invest in this dream of mine without ever, you were probably one of the few people that tasted the spirit that I was kind of making before investing, just because of our proximity.
Yeah.
But it just always blew me away that people said, this is your dream and go get it. And here's how can I help? And that was an amazing thing.
That's an interesting one last question on that. How do you even go about asking for money? I mean, who do you ask? How do you ask? It must be a really humbling experience.
It is. I mean, I started, so after I kind of identified what loans would be most appropriate for us, so we went with an SBA 7A loan. Then I started, kind of simultaneously, I was talking to investors, to friends and family, to say, here's how much capital I'm trying to raise. And then I also was talking to banks to say, this is how much of a loan I would like to take out. And I think you got to get used to hearing no a lot. Especially on the bank side of things. I went through several banks before I found one that was willing to partner with me on this and go in for it. In terms of our friends and family, I always approached it in kind of two ways. I would always send an email. I never wanted to put anybody on the spot, but I had I took my business plan, which was probably a 65-page document. I distilled it down into kind of a, maybe a 5-page, if even that, document that really just outlined our vision, our mission, our our big strategies in terms of our strategies for what we wanted to do, and then some projected financials to say, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Here's what's, I can't guarantee, we're going to hit everything because we might have a pandemic, for instance. But, and then I kind of put together a list of everybody I knew that I thought would maybe be interested in this. And then I sent it out, and it was always with the caveat is, this is my dream. I would love to have you as part of this. I need you to know that this, if this doesn't, I don't want you to be a part of this if this is making you feel stressed out on finances, whether it's, a few $100s that you want to be involved in this, up to, tens of thousands of dollars. To me, you had to be able to write that and say, go get it. And if I don't ever see it again, that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I hope that was the message I conveyed to everybody.
Yeah. All right. Last question. Besides Deanna and Chloe, what are you most grateful for? Because clearly you're obviously grateful for them.
Yeah. I mean, they're the number one, obviously. I mean, I will have an answer to this. I can't not mention how important it is to have uh, a foundation around you if you have a partner when you're starting all of this, to have someone who's supportive in what you're doing and excited and being a champion. I mean, I don't, in the moments of doubt, to have your partner say, no, you can do this, and pick you up and push you and challenge. And that's, yeah, I couldn't do it without her. I think, gosh, there's so much I'm grateful for. The community in which we kind of are nestled into and working, like the amount of people that when the pandemic hit, I mean, dang near lining up outside to purchase gift cards to say, I'm going to use this in a year or two when you're back open, and just, doing everything they could to spread the word about, how great they thought we were in buying things. So our community and customer base, I am so grateful for. My staff, I couldn't do this without the group of people that come to work every day and have completely bought into what State Line is and what we're trying to do. It is truly a thing to behold when you are starting to work, when you hire a team and you start to build a culture, and then seeing that culture instilled on your employees and like seeing that played out is such a satisfying thing, where they're making decisions that I would make, but I'm not having to say anything because there's so much like, this is the State Line way. We don't cut corners. We don't do anything, half-assed. This is it. We're going for it. So I'm so grateful to them. And I, again, I wouldn't be able to do that without their help.
Awesome. That's all I got.
I blacked out. What happened?
Anything else I'm missing?
I don't think so. I mean, if you feel like you've got everything and I didn't sound like I wasn't rambling too much or anything.
No, I got it. And like I said, I think I'll do.
I mean, you've got other people you're talking to that probably can round out a lot of it.
Yeah. I mean,